Wednesday, August 26th, it's time for our daily briefing here on KLAM and KCDV. We visit with the city manager and get caught up on a few things from her perspective and some changes coming to City Hall, given our good box score and our continued status in the green. These briefings, as I am sure you know by now, are heard in the 1, 5, and 8 p.m. hours on the radio and uploaded to youtube.com/Cordova TV for online listening, for later review, for sharing with folks that are outside the community, however you want to utilize that. So let's get into our conversation with City Manager Helen Howarth on the Clam and the Eagle. So, Helen, I'm wondering, we recently went back into this green mode where we're not on yellow alert anymore. We still don't have any active cases. How are things looking in terms of how Cordova is responding, how people are following the guidelines? What's your view of it?
I am so pleased with the way this community has responded. We are doing great. We haven't had an active case for 3 weeks. And we, as you mentioned, have moved from being in a kind of a yellow alert status into our one of our green stages, which means we're comfortable with where we are. We're really happy with the way the community is responding. We still need to be careful, but we're comfortable starting to think about reopening. So on that level, we all know that the schools are planning on they have a reopening plan in place. It involves in-person classes. They are certainly taking a lot of precautions to make sure everyone stays safe, both teachers and students in the classroom. And now City is looking at reopening City Hall to folks who need to do business either with the city or going to the library and the museum. Will be our opening date is scheduled for the 8th of September, so just around the corner. And again, we're putting a lot of precautions in place so that the community can comfortably come and participate in things at the library and the museum and at City Hall. There'll be some restrictions. We're not going to just blow open the doors, but people will be able to come to City Hall for meetings, social distance, check out books at the library with scheduled times, and participate in the museum activities, again, scheduled time. So we're easing into things.
Mm-hmm. Well, that's always good. How does as you move about the community or you do your job, the people you interact with on city staff, how does the mood kind of seem to be among folks?
I think people are cautiously optimistic. It's always scary to think, okay, we're going to open town. Anchorage went through this. They said, okay, we're going to open, and then they had to do a major retreat. So our hope is that we can cautiously start opening facilities, buildings, activities, and that we're fully prepared to go in another direction, backtrack if we have to. So again, we're hopeful, nervously, cautiously hopeful that the things that we're going to try to do will not backfire. And I really believe we won't, because the community has been really, really good about wearing masks, social distancing. That's the reason why we haven't had any new cases. So again, a lot of precautions are being put in place by the schools, by the hospital, by the city, to make sure that as we cautiously reopen, that community won't see an increase in cases.
Good. Obviously there was, in the earliest days of this, there was substantial conflict among people who had pretty differing views on how things ought to be handled. We're many months away from that now. Does it kind of feel like everybody's on the... and there's still going to be differences, obviously, but in terms of how things are unfolding, does everybody seem to be largely on the same page, or are there still some challenging issues there?
I think there's still a few challenging issues, but I think in general, people have had now the opportunity to experience COVID for 5 months. They know what they personally need to do to keep themselves safe and comfortable. They know the boundaries that they're not willing to cross, and how they want to participate in the community. So everyone is setting their own guidelines around that. And then overarching that is the community, the full city response through the incident command team that, kind of defines how people can and should participate. And then it's, again, up to the individual to determine how they do that. So for some people, the thought of sending their kids to school is probably not comfortable for them. And they will make a choice based on what they feel is best for their families. Maybe they'll go to school, maybe they'll homeschool, maybe they'll wait a little bit before they engage to see how things go. The same with City Hall. People will still be able to call into council meetings, or they can come and be in person, and people can make those choices. So I think for me, it's about making sure that people have an opportunity to participate at their level of comfort, and that we have the safety precautions in place that are best practice.
Yeah. Well, I mean, that has definitely at the state level, that has seemed to be the overall move, is to try and give individuals as the responsibility to see to themselves rather than sweeping mandates and big rules. And at
the same time, they want to make sure, they've actually said, we don't want to put a huge state protocols in place that are for the entire state because every community is different. So we want each community to decide what is best for their community, and we'll empower you to do that within reason. So not only is the state saying, okay, these are our overarching recommendations, guidelines, rules. You communities, city leaders need to define what's best for your community, and then individuals need to decide how they can participate. So.
Yeah, and you feel like it's a pretty good balance among those things?
Yeah, I do. It's been really interesting to see how other communities are doing things. There are communities that don't want you to travel there from outside of their communities without a lot of health steps, precautions in advance. Early on, we developed a mask rule. That wasn't the state's recommendation or requirement. It was our response to a need to keep our community safe, and we decided to do a mask rule. So the fact that communities are allowed to kind of really look at what their issues are and how their community needs are going to be met is really great. And the state has been very good about saying it's on you guys. So
yeah. Well, and it's funny because when the state early on seemed to be more heavy-handed about it was going to be their way only, it almost seemed like that was more of sort of a posturing battle between Dunleavy and Ethan Berkowitz up there in Anchorage. But regardless of the genesis of it, it seems to have moved largely in the opposite direction. I mean, they put out a statement. It's always hard to tell. Was it weeks ago, months ago? I don't know. But anyway, where they definitely encouraged communities to take a very active role in looking after their own, which is what Cordova's kind of been doing anyway. Anything else in the way of, have you had any frequently asked questions? Again, a lot of the major points seem to be in cruise control, but any maybe smaller points to be made here today?
I think the only question that fairly consistently comes up is around travel. So the state put a new travel mandate in place, which basically says if you have traveled outside of the state of Alaska and are returning to the state as a resident or coming to the state as a visitor, there are now testing requirements that can really impact people's movement, especially if you're a visitor.
Right.
So, but for residents, you can travel. We do have testing at the airport, and we will have testing through mid-September, at which point we'll remove it from the airport and bring it into CCMC. It's just too cold to have a testing tent out at the airport when it's, frosty outside. So we'll be still offering testing at all times to any traveler, and we will have it at the airport still for travelers until the 18th, I think, of September, which is when we're going to remove the tent from the airport and bring everything back to CCMC. But the reality is if you leave, Cordova and go somewhere else where there is active COVID, and you don't know if you've been in contact with people with or without it, because it's not like some people are asymptomatic. You never know. We encourage people to get a test if they're traveling outside of Cordova, and the state is requiring it if you've left the state. So that's the only thing. It's just, again, it's precautionary. It's to protect yourself, give you the information you need to help protect our community. So you think you don't know whether you've been in contact with anyone or not. You were in a grocery store, you were in a shopping center, you were, wherever you were, and you don't know who the people were that you were in contact with, get a test. It's just an easy thing to do. It's simple, and it is definitely something that will give everyone the information they need to keep communities safe.
Well, of course, for residents, they're still free. The visitors, if they don't have a test before they come up here, can still get one, but they need to pay for it. But for residents, you don't have that expense. Although they are still there, they have been asking you bring your insurance card, just so the medical facilities can capture some of the potential reimbursement. But even if there's a copay, or if your particular insurance doesn't pay for it, you're still not going to have to pay for it, right?
Right. Yeah. And and we are committed to that testing just because it gives everyone the information. If you test positive, you need to stay home. Yeah. If you test negative, you still have to be careful, practice social distancing, wear a mask, and stay within your bubble. But, that's just something we all now need to do. Unfortunately, it's becoming the new normal. I don't know if we ever get to go back. We'll just have to wait it out. But right now, the new normal is really, really, really follow those guidelines: hand washing, social distancing, mask wearing. It does make a difference, proven.
Okay. Well, then, again, the power is with us. That's a good way to finish. Thank you, Helen, for the visit. Always a pleasure.
Yeah, thank you. Enjoy and stay safe, everyone.
All right. Our thanks again to City Manager Helen Howarth for joining us on today's Daily Briefing, with the reminder that Cordova is doing well, remaining in the green, remaining at 0 active cases, but we don't want to get complacent and assume that means that everything is just like it was before all of this started. Some cautious optimism as careful reopening of certain facilities continues forward. And remember, if you want to review this program, in addition to being on the radio in the 1, 5, and 8 p.m. hours, it's also uploaded as soon as possible to youtube.com/Cordova TV. Keep in mind, COVID-19.cityofcordova.net when you want to check the dashboard, get any new information, the most current information. And again, our dashboard is the one to rely on when you are curious if there have been any new resident or non-resident cases in Cordova. Because sometimes the state, will report things in the Valdez Cordova census area, which doesn't necessarily mean us, even though our name is in there. And if we have a case, sometimes it takes a few days for that to be reported at the state level, but our local folks report cases regardless, by the way, of whether they are local or non-local, right away on that dashboard. So it continues to be your best source of information. Thanks again for listening in. We'll see you next time, and right now we'll get you back to regular programming on the Clam and the Eagle.